Um, I think many of our Ner Shalom members are very well aware of the series that Reb Judith and Basha have been teaching on their shared spiritual paths in Buddhism and Judaism. And this is probably the 11th of those conversations over the last number of years. And we've grown enormously fond of having both of them on our Zoom screens. Basha has been a student of Buddhism for over 25 years and of Judaism all her life. She's one of a few lucky students of Ani Pema Chodron, and through her of the Shambhala lineage as first taught by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. She teaches meditation in the North Bay at various venues and owns and runs a retreat space in West Sonoma County called Open Sky Retreat. Her favorite thing is to bring together the two wisdom traditions and to explore how her Buddhist training can inform her Jewish faith. Rabbinic pastor Judith Goleman is a chaplain and also a private practice in individual and couples counseling. As a teacher, she fell in love with the tales of the Hasidic rabbis of the 18th century who saw God as the deep nature of everything in creation. Reminds us a little bit of Michael Lerner's talk, including us in our true potential. And as an adult, she was ordained a rabbinic pastor in the Jewish renewal movement. This background also informs her psychotherapy practice. It's my great joy to turn this over to two amazing teachers. I hope you'll enjoy it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Yeah, I feel like the Michael Lerner talk and then Gesher's talk really set us up here for a good talk, because in both they were talking about the union of spirit and I hear a lot of talking, spirit and material. And as Judith and I discussed this topic, we came to notice how, on the one hand, being banned, which is the topic of this whole series of learning, restrictiveness squelches the holy sparks of the spirit. And on the other hand, banning and restriction can give birth to liberation and freedom. So there's a dichotomy right there. There's an irony right there. And when we were talking, the first example that came up, which is appropriate to Shavuot, and I just want to say I can only see Barbara on the screen. I'm going to just pin myself so I can see
you.
Yeah, there we go. There I am. And hopefully I'll see Judith soon. So the prime example that we came up with for Shavuot, which is the celebration of the revelation of the Torah, was that the Israelites weren't Jewish people until they left slavery. And Moses, who was a boy born when being born is banned, not to be too alliteration there, but he became our leader, the leader who led us out of slavery. And the slavery and the oppression propelled us and caused us to be brave enough to cross the Red Sea and to go into unknown territory. So that's one theme that we're noticing, that banishment or repression, while can be very detrimental, can also inspire you to push against and become what you were meant to be, ergo the Jewish people. So that's our first thought. And then Judith?
Yeah. So I would say, as you're saying, our main theme is restrictiveness and sparks of holiness. And that we've talked about how restrictiveness can prevent sparks of holiness or dim them or make people frightened to assert sparks of holiness, and how it can also inspire sparks of holiness. We're thinking of sparks of holiness as our expressing our deepest, truest nature, and bringing that forward. So, yeah, we talked about how slavery gave birth to the Jewish people. And we also talked about the Queen Esther story and how Esther was a young, beautiful young woman. And she entered the household of the king, but with no permission to go to see the king unless he summoned her. And then the sparks of holiness arising in her, and with great courage, she went to see the king without being summoned, risking her life. If he said, what are you doing here? That's it. And he did welcome her, and she was able to save the Jewish people. So that's another example of how restriction can inspire courage and freedom. And in this case, it was a saving of the Jewish people.
And now Geshe talked about this a lot, the Hasidic tradition, which is really Judith's strongest suit. I mean, she was inspired by Hasidism to become a rabbi and the teachings of the Kabbalah. And I remember visiting her, and she would have this beautiful tree of life in her office. And so, Judith,
yes,
tell us about the Kabbalah.
Tell you about the Kabbalah. Okay, so the Kabbalah. Sure. Okay, so the Kabbalah is a word for what's received. Kabbalah means to receive. So the Kabbalah are the spiritual traditions that have come to us as a holy people, or as a Jewish people. And the Kabbalah also was regarded by some as a threat to the structure. There's this dynamic between structure and joy and holiness and freedom. And so that happened for the Kabbalah. I call it both things because I don't really know how it's pronounced. Kabbalah. And so the Kabbalah is a tremendous source of inspiration and holiness, and helping us move within our own movement toward holiness, toward joy. And it was a departure from the structure that maintains Judaism. So it was considered threatening by some. And then at some point, the Hasidim took the Kabbalah and they brought it into song and dance and joyous expressiveness within a lot of structure. And the structure is certainly still there to a great extent.
I thought that it was structure, but they were looked down upon because they were breaking a lot of the rules. They were leaving the synagogue and going out into the fields and dancing and singing, and they were breaking with a lot of traditions in order to connect with their sparks of holiness, in order to become more spiritual.
Yeah, and I think there's always that dynamic of structures deadening our relationship to the moment and holiness and the fullest expression of reality. And it certainly also showed up in what we were just describing. But yeah.
Like you said to me, like they connected with nature versus traditionalism. You used that word traditionalism, that was kind of deadening, and connecting to nature was enlivening. And the Baal Shem Tov was the founder. I didn't know this. He was the founder of Hasidism, and his stories are the best. You're going to tell us one, right?
I'm going to tell you a Baal Shem Tov story. That's always a treat, at least for me. Okay, so this Baal Shem Tov story. This actually isn't a Baal Shem Tov story, but it's about oh, it is a Baal Shem Tov story. Okay, so the Baal Shem Tov is leading services. It's the High Holy Days. And the services are long. And there's a little boy in the services who is a shepherd. And in his pocket, he has his shepherd's pipe. And this little boy really has a sense of holiness and is loving holiness. But he's not loving the prayers. He just has trouble relating to all the words and all the words and all the words of the prayers. And he hangs out with it as long as he can, and then he just can't help himself. And he takes his pipe out of his pocket and he blows it with all his might because he wants to express his love of God, his joy of God. And then the Baal Shem Tov, who's leading the service, says, this was the prayer. This was the prayer that opened the gates of heaven to the whole congregation. This was the prayer.
Incredible.
Yeah. And his father, the boy's father, kept telling him not to play it and putting it in his pocket and trying to keep him from playing it. And that's kind of symbolic of that repressive traditionalism that doesn't allow the spontaneous joy of prayer that we're trying to connect to, which we do so well at Ner Shalom, of course, with all the music and all the heart. Yeah, what?
I do want to say that the structure also is useful for bringing us in touch with the prayers, putting us in touch with the movement of the prayer. And so praying within the structure, to my view, also has a great deal of value of bringing us into holy space also.
Yeah, you can get very fixed and structured about no structure. Right? That's the dance between no structure. Now I've got the answer. No structure. No. It's neither this nor that. This is the true spiritual path. Never lands. Now we're getting into Buddhism. The true spiritual path never lands. That's always an empty, open way to the ineffable. You can't define it. You can't you can't fix it. So we need the structure as a gateway, as an avenue. But if we get mixed up, the structure becomes what we're attached to, and we're missing the point. So just to give an example from the Buddhist side, since that was advertised as a Jewish Buddhist discussion, in Buddhism, there was something called the Heart Sutra. So the Buddha taught traditionally the Four Noble Truths and various things, and all of his monks followed that. And then came the day when he taught the Heart Sutra. And the Heart Sutra, they say, many of his monks had heart attacks, meaning they couldn't handle it because they wanted to have that structure. And suddenly in the Heart Sutra, it says, no body, no mind, no consciousness. It's the whole Heart Sutra is no, 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 no. And it lists all the things that they believed in, no consciousness, no end of consciousness, no birth, old age, and death, no end of birth, old age, and death, no suffering, no origin of suffering, no cessation of suffering, no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. And then it says, that's where we abide. The bodhisattvas abide by means of prajna paramita, no attainment, no path. At the same time that there is a path, of course, that's the irony of it. But if we get attached to it being this or that, we're missing the point. So in that way, at least in the Hasidic Judaism and Buddhism, there's a similar need to break loose from the bondage of fixed ideas to be present in the holiness of the moment. The holiness of the moment. So, which we learned if you were in Gesher's talk, very much the moment in the middle. And, Buddhism is called the middle way, and it doesn't mean compromise. It doesn't mean, okay, a little bit of this and a little bit of that and try to find a nice compromise. The middle way actually refers to no extremes. It's neither all this nor not all that. It's neither a little bit of this and a little bit of that. You cannot land. That's what the middle way really means. I didn't know that at first. I thought it meant compromise, but it means hovering, not landing, like hovering in the middle. So when you see that Jewish star that Gesher showed us, right in the middle, he says that's the emptiness. That's where he dwells. That's very Buddhist, dwelling in the emptiness. I wanted to tell just a couple more examples. I'm watching the time very carefully. Of when you're banished or restricted, what comes out of it can be very exciting. And one of them is from my life when I lived in Indonesia, in Jakarta. Did you know that in Jakarta, all religions are allowed except Judaism? Judaism was banned, and you couldn't be Jewish, you couldn't meet. However, we did, we met all the time, and there was never a more spirited group than the group, until, of course, now, Ner Shalom, but there was never a more spirited group than the people in Indonesia and Jakarta who weren't allowed to practice their religion. So when we practiced it, it was very alive. So that's sort of the rebel side of me loves this, that rebelling against restriction gives you a lot of energy. And actually, when I think about it, when I belonged before Ner Shalom to Shomrei Torah, we were like a scrappy little synagogue living in a church. And when I got to Ner Shalom, we were all like very scrappy, like different. And that appeals to me, sort of breaking through because somehow spiritual connection for me comes through. But see, Judith beautifully talked about how structure helps her. That's why we're a very good combination. My other example is the women's movement, because when I got into the women's movement in the early 70s, in the early 70s, late 60s, women were banned in a lot of ways. Women didn't have a voice. Women weren't thought of. Women, we were relegated to making coffee for the men who were doing the important work. So when we realized that and we started to get together, a great energy was unleashed, and it was very empowering. And we reacted to being banned in a sense by discovering who we really were and strengthening what was important. Those consciousness raising groups really were a result of not having been allowed to be together. And there's many, many more examples of that. So Judith is going to talk about families.
Yeah, we decided that I would talk about, because I have a psychotherapy practice, about our families of origin and the way that families can be frightened of certain aspects of life and banning certain aspects of life. And that, to my view, we all have a true self that somewhere in us is our authentic reaction to everything. And chances are in our family, some aspects of our true self were downplayed or not allowed. In my family, my parents were both college teachers. And so that was wonderful in a lot of ways. But I think that if I had a wild and crazy true self, it wasn't really allowed. There wasn't really room for it. I remember when my brother was a teenager, he couldn't go out joyriding. I wasn't quite sure what that was, but it sounded like fun. It's something you'd want to do as a teenager. So I was thinking like that you might want to take a moment and think about what wasn't allowed in completely in your family of your true self, if there was something, pressures, aspects of yourself that may have been discouraged or undermined. Like some families never get angry. You have to suppress healthy anger. Can't date anyone who's not Jewish. People aren't allowed to make, you weren't allowed to make all your own choices in that way. And so I'd like you to take a moment, Basha, is this all right with you if we just take a moment and think about our own family and any aspect of our holy sparks, our true self, our self-expression that wasn't completely allowed? Anger, emotion, dating outside your faith, joyriding.
Mhm.
Reb Judith, did you want us to put those ahas into the chat?
Actually, what I would love is if we brought them forward verbally.
Yeah, we have enough time for people to share. We thought you'd think about this for a little while. What things in your life were banned and you weren't allowed to express? And then what happened because of that? Were they suppressed for the rest of your life? Are you just now realizing it, or did you somehow find a way to express it? And we thought you could journal about it a little bit and think about it, and then we could share some of that. And also, not only in your personal life, but also perhaps socially in your community, that you were a part of a group that was looked down upon or banned or restricted and not recognized, like the women's movement that I mentioned, or being gay before it was cool to be gay. It wasn't always cool to be gay. My children think it's very cool to be gay, but when I was young, it was not. It was scary. So during my gay life, which I had for 10 years, I was very closeted, very scared. And so that's a social banning. Um, I was laughing when Judith said this because I was thinking I was not allowed to speak out. And have I
Whoa,
I've
you
overcome
conquered
that.
that one.
Here I am. Anyway, so maybe you have some things to share, and so we can have a gallery view. And if you wanted to raise your hand, or if you know how to do that, or speak up. I see Leah Bowden's here, so I'm counting on her. Hi, Leah.
Hi there.
Get a gallery view. Great.
There you are.
And yes, okay.
Oh,
Oh, am I going first? What a surprise.
I know. I'm counting on you.
We're calling on ya.
Okay, so the thing that I've only realized recently, like in the last month, is that the picture that I had of my mother while I was growing up was not, and I see that my face is freezing, but you can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you.
The picture that I had of my mother as my model was not all of who she was. She had more lusty passion for life than she showed. And I didn't know this until really recently. However, that said, I was a good girl. And one night, my cousin, remember the movie Cleopatra with Elizabeth Taylor?
Yeah.
With the eye makeup. One night, my cousin made me up like big Egyptian eyes. I was 16 or 17 or 18. I don't know. I was driving in upstate New York. So we went to a a deli cafe house, coffee house, kind of, not a coffee house, but a place to have coffee in the evening with my makeup on because I felt kind of jazzy. The next morning, my father was livid. He was the president of the congregation. He said that someone had seen me and called him up and told him that I looked like a whore.
Oh, oh,
And
wow.
to me, it had just been a demonstration of delightful, rather well done cosmetic creativity. And
Yeah.
I was shocked that, and I was also embarrassed. I did not want my father to feel belittled, which is how apparently he felt. So that was a lesson for me. I didn't know I wasn't allowed to express whatever it was I was expressing, a certain kind of wild creativity, but apparently I wasn't.
Which was your mother's inner self, you're saying? It was her inner glamorous self that was coming out through you, perhaps.
That's a good example of a cultural limit, that how it can suppress us, try to. Didn't succeed in that case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a good, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Leah. So, has somebody else have something to share? Yeah,
Yeah,
Ruach,
yeah,
Devorah.
yeah. Definitely wasn't allowed to show anger.
Uh-huh.
That was a big no-no. That was being quote unquote fresh or impertinent to answer back. And such old-fashioned words, it sounds like as I say them out loud. But that was definitely not appreciated, not allowed. Yeah.
And how has it worked itself out?
That's a good question. I do still get angry. Um, That's a good question. I guess it was responsible for keeping me angry in my younger years
Uh-huh.
after I'd left home.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Now that I think about it, yeah.
Uh-huh. It kept you angry in your
Yeah,
younger
for
years
about
because
10
you hadn't
years.
been.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
that was why. I never thought about why, but I knew I
Yeah.
was angry
Yeah.
then. Yeah,
And I feel like
Yeah.
our anger is sort of a cleansing, like it's,
absolutely. Yeah,
justice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Debut.
Thank you, Shamati. Um,
I would say that I never, when I was raised in a little town in Texas, and uh, I never could fit in with the girl groups. You know, they were so feminine, and I was never. I never liked to dress in dresses or wear makeup or anything like that, and so I always felt like I don't know what how how am I ever going to have friends and that sort of thing. And, in those days back in Texas, we never heard about gays or lesbians and all of that stuff. It was just you were a man or a woman, and you like boys or girls. Boys if you're a girl, and girls if you're a boy. So yeah, it was interesting. I didn't learn about homosexuality until I was in my 20s, past graduating college even. And I went to a women's group, and I came home and told the man that I was partners with, Walter. I said, Walter, did you know that sometimes women sleep with women and men with men? And he's like, yeah, I heard of that.
I've heard of it.
He went
So
to
did
Princeton.
you?
He had gay relationships. And he came out as gay long before I came.
Was one of the results leaving Texas?
I would think
Oh,
so,
oh,
right?
yeah. As soon as I graduated college, I left Texas and never looked back on
Yeah.
that. So,
Yeah, I had in my mind moved you from Texas to San Francisco immediately.
yeah, right, right, exactly. Yeah, at first I was in Newark, New Jersey. I was born in Vista, and we went to New York City a lot, and so we saw
Yeah.
lots of different lifestyles there.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Truth.
Anybody else? I'm sure there's a lot of people here. Yes, Dorothy.
Well, my parents had beautiful beliefs. They never wanted me to have shame about my body, so they let me dance naked. And I have to say, it was a wonderful feeling.
Oh.
And I danced for their friends naked. I was naked. I finally did realize that being outside without underwear was a little bit, some people didn't think that was right. And they're pointing to my vagina and saying, she's not wearing panties. But at the same time, that I'm trying listening to everyone and listening to what you said about what was, there was something that wasn't there. They believed in the idea, but they didn't have I didn't never felt close to my parents. So it was a bunch of ideas, good ideas, which kind of rescued me from some of the bad parts of it. But I never felt that I was having a personal relationship with the parents.
Wow.
And there was a lot of screaming and yelling in the house, but I wasn't allowed to be angry. I wasn't allowed to have that. Don't go down to that level, my mother would say. My father was the angry one, but she was very angry too. So there was a lot of anger, a lot of fear. Like I never knew what was going to happen next. So even though I had some of the underpinnings of freedom, I had the opposite.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time, and I'm still trying to find, not to only please to get attention and love, but to be myself. It seems like a very distant thing I'm working towards. Being who I am, how I feel, and feeling how I feel, and having that freedom, and not the other problem.
Thank you, Dorothy. I think that something you said was very interesting, that the ideas were very strong, but the spirit was not there. The spirit of love and support was not there, but the ideas were strong. So that's an interesting, that's part of what we're talking about, that sometimes structures keep the spirit out, even if the structure is one of freedom. Dance naked if you want to.
Yeah.
But they're not letting the spirit in because of fixed ideas. So fixed ideas is a big thing in Buddhism. Big thing. To not be, what's that?
Don't be fixed.
Right. Be careful of fixed ideas, very much so. That it's an imprisonment, and it doesn't allow for your true self to come through. That's what you're sort of saying. And you're still it's a work in progress for sure. It's a work in progress.
I'm just wanting to send you a lot of blessings that you get really noisy and really just let it all happen.
Get out.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I call that the fuck dance. I just say fuck this, fuck
that. Oh God, this group is getting very raunchy.
Yeah. Basha, both Susan,
cultural limits. That was that is in a way it's a cultural limit. I think it's a Jewish thing to have ideas.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yes, Barbara.
Both Susan Levine and Tish have had their hands up.
Oh, thank you.
May not be able to see that little symbol in their box.
I see. Tish, go ahead, and then Susan.
Okay. Well, what comes to mind from the gate really was my mother didn't have any boundaries. She was very enmeshing. And I remember being 9 and I read about Roy Chapman Andrews and hunting dinosaur eggs in the Gobi Desert. And she said, "Don't worry, daughter, I'll go with you." And at various stages, it was, "Don't worry, daughter, I'll go with you." My senior year of high school, I went away to a Catholic girls' school. And I'm the only person I know who has good Catholic stories. Because these nuns were, first of all, they were the nuns that Coretta Kent was part of. So that gives you, if you know who she was, the first love stamp. And she brought serigraph to the United States as an art form. And she was there at the time. I mean, she was at the college, but it was adjacent. So, but these nuns, they They weren't verbally abusive. They weren't psychological. And I thought it was because they were nuns. So at Christmas, I went home and told my mother that I had decided that I thought I would like to take the veil. 2 weeks later, she called me to tell me that she had found an order that would take us both. I'm not kidding.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So fortunately, I had to break free. I had to break free. And we didn't even talk for like 3 years, during which time I got married. And then she kind of came back into our lives. And the night before she died, she called and she was going to come to visit for the weekend. The last time she had come for 6 months. And my husband said, no, that can't happen. And she died. And, it's a hard thing, but for many, many years, I would get up in the morning and say, thank you, God. I don't see how I could have become anybody other than this if that hadn't happened. And now I can be okay. I can see the good that was in her. She was a fantastic person. But that's all I can think about was, I just it was so hard how to break free from that and become a person. I was 23 when she died, and I think that if she hadn't died for another 10 years, I might never have gotten free. And it's a terrible thing to say, and yet it was what was. So I don't know if that has anything to do with what we're talking about at all.
Absolutely it does. Absolutely. Okay. Thank you. Yes.
Judith, speak. This is your territory.
Speak, Judith, speak.
Oh, Tish. Well, you had the suffering that comes with being in families, right?
That's true.
Where there's people having power that are abusing it, not intentionally.
No.
But limiting you in ways that really infringed on your spiritual truth of who you are. And thank heavens, thank God you've found your own path to your own truth to express it in your life. But your mother wouldn't have been able to allow you or help you with that.
I don't think so. I think that she had that kind of relationship with her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And her mother, you hear about couples and one person dies and often the other will die within 6 months. Mm-hmm. She died within a little over a year of her mother dying. Mm-hmm. I think they had that kind of a very enmeshed relationship. And it's just, some families do that.
I celebrate for you your freedom from that.
Thank you, dear heart.
Thank you so much, Tish and Judith. We have time for one more, perhaps. One more share.
Susan Levine.
So you know what? Renee has her hand raised. You go ahead, Renee.
Oh, we have time for both. Go ahead, Susan. You're up.
Okay. I have the good fortune of having virtually no limitations placed on me as I grew up. My parents trusted me, particularly my mother. Mm-hmm. And there might be times where my father would want to say no to something that I wanted to do. But my mother would always say, yes, let's let her do it. So when I was in high school, I said to my parents, I want to go to Omaha, Nebraska on a bus full of college kids to canvass for George McGovern. And my dad said, she can't get on a bus with all those college students. And my mother said, yes, she can. I trust her. Now, little did she know that I made out on the bus with a cute college boy. But having that trust from your parents your whole life, it's so empowering. So I was very fortunate.
That's true.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, and Judith was going to talk a little bit about how structure brings us a peace, and that's how we're going to conclude. But we have till what, 9:20, right? Correct? So one more, Renee, go ahead.
Okay, well, My story is probably the opposite. I'm not on there, but that's okay. Um, the opposite of Susan's, and you could see why she's president of the congregation and I'm not, because I was the girl and the younger one, the baby of the family. My brother was the boy, and he got to be very independent. He sold popcorn, everything at the Indian Stadium when he was very young. Was a coin collector. He did all this stuff. And they restricted me and sheltered me. And that made me grow up without very much confidence because they always thought I was going to get hurt. I ice skated and that was my passion. I wanted to be in the ice follies. And that I really enjoyed, but my mother was always thinking I was going to get hurt. So it
Mhm.
caused me actually to
Yeah.
get hurt one time. But
Oh,
so I got to
interesting.
play piano and I got to take ballet, which I loved, but I didn't like my piano teacher. So anyway, I didn't develop the confidence because they sheltered me quite a bit and babied me.
I see.
It's so interesting how sheltering you really is a vote of no confidence, right? I mean,
Yeah, it was a vote of no confidence.
you
Yeah.
feel protected and yeah. Mm.
Well, you all have now witnessed Judith's brilliance as a therapist because she just did her work right in front of you.
I did.
Thank you, Judith.
What? You?
So, in the last part of our talk, we wanted to now we've talked about how structure limits you and how you have to break free from it. But Judith wants to say a word about the beauty of structure and how it brought her to prayer and to, well, go ahead, Judith, tell him.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was thinking,
How you became spiritual, how you got inspired. It's
well,
a really
actually, I
good
became
story.
spiritual because I just very accidentally experienced God when I was like 18 or 19. Just had this experience of, I think it was through my class in Spinoza at Stanford. I had a class in the philosopher Bruce Spinoza, who's called the God intoxicated philosopher.
Mhm.
And he just saw the eternal inside physical reality. And I think it somehow just took me to a place of feeling the eternal inside physical reality. So that was just incredible luck for me. So what point am I making, Basha?
So that you reclaimed your spirituality and began to use prayer to connect. I think that's what you were telling me.
Oh,
And you,
well, I
yeah.
think that's later in my life. I was really wonderful to have this basis of feeling God in reality in my life. And then later, when I connected more deeply with conservative Judaism, Beth and Me, and so on, I was given a structure for prayer. And then I could use the prayers to take me into this feeling or awareness that I had obtained of holiness. So that was good. That was very nice for me.
Yeah, I think that well, Judith and I were both taught by Rabbi Michael Robinson that, and Gesher mentioned it too, the word for God is was, will, and was, is, and will be, the unfolding nature of reality itself.
He used to say the ongoing unfolding of reality itself. That's what I
There you
remember
go.
Michael
The
Robinson.
ongoing, unfolding nature of reality itself. And for me as a Jewish Buddhist, this brings the both of those together very beautifully because that's what Buddhists are all about. They're about trying to connect with the reality itself and to break down the veils that keep us from connecting, from experiencing reality itself, which in the Jewish tradition is God. So there's really no difference for me between those two. The thing is that we do have in Buddhism and Judaism beautiful rituals to help us to connect, to bypass, or to break through our self-imposed structures that keep us from connecting. So they can be a vehicle towards that, because really you cannot do it without that. Otherwise, you're just in a fog of ego, thinking it's this, it's that, projecting. But the rituals can help us to connect and to unleash or free up those sparks. But
you put our attention there. Say,
yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, just that. They help us put our attention.
Put our attention there. Right. And so that we can receive. It's a kind of receiving. Gesher, again, said, Baruch is blessing, but it's about receiving blessings. So how do you receive blessings? You have to erase or break through your fixed ideas of what it's going to be, because you'll miss it if you have fixed ideas. You have to open to what might come in and see the unity of all things. In the very beginning talk, we were pointed out that the duality is kind of what we live with. That's our world, but there is a consciousness that is all-encompassing. Ein Sof in the Jewish tradition, and in Buddhism, it's called emptiness, the emptiness of everything that is. So it doesn't mean that there's nothing there. It means empty of concept in Buddhism, empty of putting a label on it, empty of fixing it as one idea as this or that. So, where's Judith? She's gone?
I'm here. I'm still here.
Okay. So I think that on this night of the Living Torah, this is a time to ask yourself, are you breathing life into the structures you have? Or are they just routines keeping you from experiencing that alive quality? Are you breathing life into the structures you have?
And I would call it that prayer. I'm sorry for interrupting.
Go ahead, please.
That piece of the prayer that goes, loving God or reality itself with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. It's one that helps me.
Love. In other words, love is a very good avenue for this. Being in love with life, being in love with what
That's
is.
a good thing.
Yeah. And not afraid. Fear keeps us fear is what we protect ourselves. Fear helps us protect from what might hurt us, but then we overprotect and we can't feel anything. Nothing can come in. So I think that's all we have to say.
I was going to jump in and acknowledge both of you as such heartfelt teachers. And the way in which you support each other's visions and help us figure out where we are on the spectrum. And I'm so very grateful you were able to teach this evening.